Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnars back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about transit Neptune, square, opposition, or inconjunct one's natal south node. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Neptune, it can be about dreams, fantasies, inspiration, self-sacrifice, ideals, and things that are unrealistic. Now, when transit Neptune is basically making an adverse aspect to the natal south node. Now, I'm going to elaborate on that. When I say basically adverse aspect, now squares and oppositions, of course, those are negative and adverse aspects in astrology. But the inconjunct, it's neutral, but a neutral aspect can have good and bad qualities in it, and coupled with the fact an inconjunct can often require an adjustment or transition, and those things, of course, can cause some exasperation and tension. So basically, collectively, I do see this as an adverse transit. Now, again, when transit Neptune is basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal south node, it may manifest in dreams and fantasies, inspiration, self-sacrifice, ideals, unrealism, and these things may conflict with what you're trying to go away from. It might be harder maybe to get away from those things at this time, getting away from your fantasizing and your daydreaming at this point in time even matters with lethargy, inertia, being stagnant, just basically, fatigue and tiredness. Those things might actually be a little harder to get away from, because keep in mind the south node is what we're trying to leave behind. It's what we're trying to get away from. But when you have the transit of Neptune, basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal south node, those things could be harder to get away from. Even escapist tactics, those things can be harder to leave. If anybody's having this transit that's experiencing any problems with drugs or alcohol, those things may be harder to extricate yourself from at this time as well. Also, too, the south node is connected with the past as well, and some of you may believe in past lives. For those of you that do, it might be a time when you may be trying to get away from somebody you believe is connected with that, or just somebody from your past in general, and those things might be harder perhaps to escape at this time, more so than usual. Remember that Neptune is connected with escapism, and the south node can be connected with the past, and those things that you're trying to leave behind may be harder to do at this time, because it may be something where maybe you lack the inspiration to do so at this time. If the south node is in Virgo, it could be some critical or judgmental kind of attitude, or some hypochondriac tendencies, if that does apply anymore, that word. It's really a time to, the south node can also be energy that can affect one to their detriment. So if there's anything that's affecting beauty or detriments connected with the south node, it might be harder to be inspired to deal with that energy at this time. It might be a time where you may be really maybe fantasizing more about dealing with it than you're actually actually putting it into action, trying to really eliminate that. Perhaps it can be something to look at this transit as well. This energy, connected with Neptune, these things may affect you more to your detriment at this time, more so than usual. Whether it's fantasizing or daydreaming, or even matters with altruism and self-sacrificing, those things are not bad. But for example, it can if you're trying to do something with your own life and it's prohibiting progress in that, self-sacrificing is good, but even too much of that may not be so good if it's conflicting with things you need to do for yourself. As an example, now the south node can also be positive, and I see the south node is what you can naturally be proficient in. These are they're overdeveloped, redundant qualities, but it's also energy you may naturally be good at. But the thing about this is, when you have the transit of Neptune, again basically making an adverse aspect to natal south node, it may be expressed in not having really the desire, that inspiration, um, really, and to really do things that you're naturally proficient in connection with the South Node placement, where you might, again, going back to the daydreaming, fantasizing thing, it could be where you might be feeling lethargic and sleepy, and these things, tiredness may be such where it's challenging to do those things you naturally can flourish in. If the South Node is in Aquarius, it might be something with with astrology or astronomy, even innovation. Um, as some examples, altruism even. The thing too is, again, going back to the fact the South Node is associated with those overdeveloped and redundant qualities. It can be something where, if you're trying, if the South Node, the South Node is energy that you're really trying to get away from to begin with, and it's supposed to be where the North Node is supposed to be more accentuated and highlighted in the second half of one's life, which I would say would be like 35 years old and up. And but the thing is, those things, again, that South Node energy, that redundant energy, may be harder to leave at this point in time. The South Node in Aquarius, could be very, for example, could be very non-conforming energy. It could be energy where one just wants to be unique and different for the sake of being unique and different, and it doesn't matter, how it may appear, or even consequences the person may face as a result of, expressing that energy. And it may be harder to get away from, because keep in mind, Neptune is, about escaping. But anyway, another thing too is that keep in mind, the South Node is also connected with the comfort zone. It can be that area where one may become very self-satisfied and complacent in, and you may stay there because it's something that you're just, you may actually naturally, again, be proficient in, something you might really flourish in, but it's not something that needs to be emphasized, especially later on in the person's life. Now, this could be, a situation where it might be harder to get out of that comfort zone at this time. You may be dealing, it could be where you're very uninspired at this time to really leave that energy. And maybe, again, going back to, being, doing things with, daydreaming and fantasizing, just being stagnant, just relaxing, and not really taking the time to really, try to gradually, eliminate that energy, at least to some degree. Now, the South Node, anyway, is not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily supposed to be completely eradicated, but the North Node is what can be, is what's supposed to be emphasized in the latter part of one's second half of one's life. And you could incorporate the South Node a little bit with that North Node energy. But it's not, it's not something generally that is going to be emphasized, especially that latter part of one's life. But anyway, another way that this transit may manifest, doing things with self-sacrificing, altruism, those things might conflict with, again, what you might naturally be proficient in. Say if the South Node is in, say if it's in Virgo in the 5th house as an example, or I'm sorry, let's say if the South Node is in Pisces in the 5th house as an example, it could be maybe the creation of simulated, sports games or fantasy games, or even playing fantasy games. Those things might be something that might come very naturally to you, but the thing about it is, you might be trying to try to eliminate and get away from that urge, but you might and develop more of the North Node energy. But it could be doing things, whether it's matters with sacrificing or doing with some chaos in your life, might be like a distraction to it at this point in time. And keep in mind, Neptune is also connected with addiction, and the fact that you have this making an adverse aspect to natal South Node, it might be something where it becomes like a very, some kind of maybe an addiction in a way, that South Node energy, unfortunately, and that in turn can make it more difficult to get away from at this point in time. Now, another way this transit may be expressed, it could be where you may be dealing with some chaos that might challenge, your dealings and interactions, your activities with somebody that might be prominent from your past. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, now as an example, let's say if the South Node is in Scorpio in the 12th house as an example, maybe this was a person that might have transformed you spiritually. Um, Keep in mind, Scorpio is associated with transformation. The 12th house is spirituality. Let's say, if it's in Capricorn in the 11th house, it could be somebody that was like a mentor of astrology or astronomy or computers. Mentoring can be connected with Capricorn. The 11th house can correspond with astrology, astronomy, and computers. Now, also too, lethargy, fatigue, tiredness may adversely affect what you're trying to leave behind. Now, if the South Node, for example, if the South Node is in Cancer in the 3rd house, it could be, leaving behind maybe a clingy or overly dependent neighbor at this time, or even a sibling or cousin. Now, also too, another way this transit may manifest could be if there's any issues with the feet, the toes, the lymphatic or immune system. Those things may make it harder again to get away from at this time. And the thing about this is, and also it could be dealing with Neptune people. They could be, people in the metaphysical, which includes astrology, or people that are in photography or poetry or dancing. It could be people that are involved in drugs. It could be addicts. It might be anyone that's Neptune related may exacerbate the negative qualities of that South Node placement. And say if the South Node is in Aries as an example, it might bring out more acrimonious or acerbic and argumentative energy as an example. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnars saying stay well.